I guess to start with speed endurance, how would you sort of define speed endurance for the listeners, I guess, thinking of high performance stuff, but
Yeah.
also for the athletes tuning in as well?
Yeah. So speed endurance would be all out efforts of kind of in that 15 to 20-second duration with an aim of getting a really high peak lactate to really tax that anaerobic energy system. So we might do those to improve the amount of energy we can produce anaerobically.
Mhm. And then maximal aerobic speed?
Yeah, so maximal aerobic speed is a term that's developed in the field with an aim of eliciting that internal load of VO2 max. So it's a speed estimate that equates to a pace that would, if we ran at that pace, would be taxing our VO2 max stimulus. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then
That's
the
different,
last
maybe
two.
just to clarify, like in the lab, you would have velocity at VO2 max.
Yep.
And the difference between the two is in the lab, you would have the gas analysis. So in the field, it's always an estimate.
And probably the next two popular terms will be critical speed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So critical speed is the last sustainable pace where you're almost exclusively working aerobically. So your heart rate, your breathing, your blood lactate, your perception of effort are stable at this pace. When you move beyond it, you transition from that steady physiology into non-steady physiology. So when you're underneath and at that critical speed pace, your fatigue cost is much less, right? Your recovery is much better from that type of workout. And you're really limiting the amount of anaerobic energy sources that are contributing to the workout. It isn't zero, but it is a lot less. Once you start going above that critical speed towards that MAS or VO2 max intensity, that's when you start recruiting more fast twitch muscle to do the work, right? That's when you start producing more and more lactate the longer you sustain an effort. And so that's where that you want that distinction in your training between those two items. We've got a really nice example here of some different profiles in AFLs. So we explain what we mean by a speed profile. We can use something called the anaerobic speed reserve, which is the speed range from the maximal aerobic speed through to the maximal sprinting speed. If you plot those two landmarks across your group, so your 6-minute or 2K time trial and your sprinting speed, you essentially get a spread of differences within your group, right? So some people that are very speed oriented, some that have a good balance of both, and some that are more endurance dominant. So here are some player examples of that. So we got Charlie Cameron, a sprinting speed there, that would be around just approaching 10 meters a second. We've got a hybrid profile, so someone who's very good both on the endurance side and both on the sprinting side. And then we got Sam Walsh averaging, in one particular season here, 15 Ks in a game.
On low intensity zone 2 under LT1, how much is too much for speed profile? Would you do it only over off-season, pre-season, question mark?
Yeah, so to answer the last question first, no, I wouldn't only do it in off-season, pre-season, because that's a key part of building the bank account, right? So if you stop making deposits and your moderate intensity isn't controlled, you can suddenly find that you're not actually making deposits when you thought you were. That's the really dangerous place to end up in. Then you end up in a scenario where you go, oh, we thought the players were fit because they'd done all this work, but they were working too hard. They weren't executing right. And it was all intensity. So how much is too much? I think the mechanical bit is the main concern there, right? And the emphasis of it should feel easy. So it's typically going to be in that sort of 70-ish% of your max heart rate. If it's starting to creep up into 80s, then it's starting to be something else, right? It's starting to move towards critical speed. So this is where the execution matters. So you want to anchor it in an effort and a percentage of heart rate max. So typically around that 70%. What is the minimal dose for an endurance profile? So it's a good question, but the minimal dose question, I think, is the wrong question. And here's why. The minimal dose question alludes that there is a number that is enough right? We're going to arrive at a destination where we've done enough and we've got this adaptation. And it doesn't work like that. If we know that an endurance profile gets there from maximizing their aerobic system, we want the maximal sustainable amount. Typically, endurance profiles are more comfortable on feet for the low intensity. In middle distance runners, which I use as a reference for physiology that is maximized, that needs both speed and endurance, in one session, you'd be getting up towards that 50-minute mark in one session. A long run for an endurance athlete would be, up in that 90 minutes to 2 hours, but that's not realistic for team sports. You got too many other variables going on. So I think just trying to drop it in when you can, because everything you can do, even if it's 20 to 30 minutes easy as a top up or a recovery, is adding to the bank account.